Well, why did you think that nihilism was a subject worth talking about in that abstract sense?
Excesul de conștiință este fatal. An excess of consciousness is fatal. Emil Cioran. This is a feeling most of us struggle with, whether it's in work life, in the day-to-day monotony and mundaneness we're faced with, or just the bare weight of existence within the confines of a life we never chose to be born into. The stress of systems, traditions, and norms we never had a choice to opt in for. Nihilism is a term people coin to this mentality, and you wouldn't be too wrong about it. But what really is nihilism? Well, I think most people just run with the baseline trivialized conception of nihilism, as in believing in nothing at all. No morality, no values, no purpose, or that nihilists are simply totalitarian pessimists. This trivialized version of nihilism is therefore not really a philosophy at all. Many people like to associate nihilism with writers such as Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, even Camus or Dostoevsky in some cases. But in reality, each of these writers affirm nihilism as a condition created by the absurdity and meaninglessness of existence in rapport with humanity. But each of these reject the surface level facade of nihilism and revolt against it in their own way. But in this melting pot of so-called nihilists, one of them rules overall. Emil Cioran is born in 1911 in Rășinat, Romania, to an Orthodox priest who, although had a strong faith, was highly educated, discussing faith and religion over glasses of wine in their family home. This aspect of his life would have a profound impact on his philosophical and theological beliefs, as Cioran would find himself in a weird place between the Christian faith and atheism. In the book On the Heights of Despair, written when he was only 22, he speaks with a shocking, almost serene indifference. No matter which way we go, it is no better than any other. It is all the same whether you achieve something or not, have faith or not, just as it is all the same whether you cry or remain silent. It's the beginning of a lifelong metaphysical stance. Existence is not a problem to be solved, but a wound to be endured. The fact that the book won the King's Prize for Literature in Romania is almost comic in hindsight. It is after all one of the most anti-establishment, anti-hopeful, anti-anything texts ever honored by a state. But the award isn't what matters. What matters is that from the very beginning, Cioran understood despair not as a mood, but as a method. Consciousness is the original catastrophe. To be born is to be hurled into a world you never asked for, thrown into a body you didn't choose, condemned to a mind that won't stop chewing on itself. It is not worth the bother of killing yourself, since you always kill yourself too late. It's not that suicide solves nothing, it's that it solves it after everything has already happened. When World War II reshaped Europe and Romania collapsed into a Soviet-backed dictatorship, Cioran found himself permanently severed from his homeland. His books were banned, his return forbidden, and his past erased from the cultural memory of his own country. But paradoxically, exile liberated him. It stripped him of identity, of belonging, of nationality, of every illusion we cling to in order to believe our lives have a narrative arc. In Paris, writing in a foreign language, living in near poverty, he discovered the perfect laboratory for his worldview. In Cioranian thought, being human is exactly the same as being exiled. Forced into exile for 15 years, in 1956, Cioran writes The Temptation to Exist. Plagued by a sense of alienation caused by this exile, his philosophy does take quite a turn. In Romania, he was immersed in Romanian intellectual debates, which were intensely political and ideological. But when he moved to Paris, the critiques, the fiery style of writing fading into obscurity, it became a deeply poetic, aphoristic, and meditational style of philosophy, which is an absolute pleasure and also a headache at the same time to read. In the arguably most famous quote of his, which is present in this book, "It is not worth the bother of killing yourself since you always kill yourself too late," Cioran voices a despair which is so crushing and suffocating that the concept of meaning and chasing meaning just becomes ridiculous at this point. Cioran posits that life, in its essence, is an arduous endeavor. This perspective drives individuals into a relentless search for something that would give their lives meaning and justify their suffering. However, This search for meaning often yields little more than a confrontation with the absurd, the realization that the universe offers no answers to our earnest inquiries, and to this quiet denial that the universe hands us. Cioran doesn't resign to a religion like Dostoevsky, to a value system like Sartre, to revolting against the absurd with nobility as Camus, or to the fanatical heights of the Übermensch. Cioran simply accepts the fact that from day one of being born, his life was already going downhill, and in this realization, he embraces the despair of existence. He is quite honestly fascinated with it. But Cioran is not just a nihilist who declares life crude and meaningless. He analyzes why we seek meaning and why it always fails. Dostoevsky's characters put Russia on the same footing as God. Among the Russians, messianism derives from an inner uncertainty, aggravated by pride, from a determination to assert their faults, to impose them on others, to discharge a suspect overflow upon them. The aspiration to save the world is the morbid phenomenon of a people's youth. In this fragment, Cioran is not just analyzing Russia, he is diagnosing Dostoevsky himself. Dostoevsky's faith is less a conviction and more a fever in Cioran's eyes, a manic attempt to stabilize an inner earthquake. The Russian obsession with redemption becomes a symptom of a deeper instability, a frantic attempt to anchor oneself in anything. God, Russia, suffering, salvation, so long as it prevents collapse. Cioran's pessimism doesn't shift much over time. What changes is the scope as he immerses himself in the works of Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Hegel, Camus, Sartre, Dostoevsky, even Taoism and Buddhism. And then there is Camus, who sold hundreds of thousands of copies at Gallimard, who became the poster boy of French existentialism. Camus looked at Cioran as if he were some peculiar Romanian peasant just learning to read big ideas. He spoke to him, as Cioran later recalled, with a tone of superior mentorship, entered the circulation of ideas, he advised, as if Parisian intellectual life were some grand colosseum, when it is in fact the most surface level philosophy we see now. Camus sought out existentialism and its dilemmas as some sort of artistic literary sport, while Cioran saw it as mental illness. The tragedy isn't that life has no meaning. The tragedy is that humans cannot stop looking for meaning or ways to explain meaninglessness. Sisyphus doesn't just roll the boulder up the hill, he needs the boulder. Without it, he is lost. Existentialism, for all its talk of absurdity, is still allergic to despair. It cannot leave things alone. It must rescue a man at the last second through choice, revolt, authenticity, or responsibility. Even Sisyphus must be saved from himself. He must be imagined happy, as if happiness were a moral duty. At its bottom, existentialism is not a confrontation with meaninglessness, but rather a strategy for surviving it with one's dignity intact in Camus' world. Cioran has no interest in dignity. He writes from place prior to solutions, hope, or rebellion, which Camus so vehemently suggests. That is why Cioran feels so anachronistic and so current at the same time. In a world addicted to meaning or searching for it, Cioran remains scandalous because he does not offer an alternative. He suggests quietly and without consolation that nothing is coming to save us, and that learning to live with the fact may be the only honest position left. Asking what we can extract from Cioran already feels like a mistake. He offers no tools, no practices, no rules for living well. Any attempt to turn his thought into advice risks betraying it. And yet, there is something to be gained, I think. The first is a permission most philosophies never grant. The permission to stop searching. Cioran does not demand that despair be overcome, reframed, or redeemed. He allows it to exist without forcing it to justify itself. In a culture that treats suffering as a problem to be solved or a rescue to be exploited, to feel lost without a immediately narrating that loss as growth is already a form of honesty. Secondly, Cioran dismantles the moral pressure to be meaningful. Modern life is saturated with imperatives. To be productive, to leave a mark, to become someone or leave a family behind. Cioran punctures these demands by exposing their arbitrariness. Not everyone needs a mission, not every life requires a story. And in that thought, there is a strange freedom in realizing that insignificance is not a failure, but a default condition. Renunciation doesn't become ascetic heroism. Cioran doesn't preach withdrawal from the world, but detachment from the illusions that make the world unbearable. There is also a more uncomfortable lesson. Lucidity is not happiness. Emil Cioran never promises peace, only clarity. But clarity has its own value. To see through consolations, even the comforting ones, is to stop being surprised by disappointment.
Maintenant, il faut que vous entriez dans la circulation des idées. Oh,